The Hunter, Outline 1. This turned out to be exactly what I'd hoped. A successful failure. World building is a ton of fun, but without a story backbone, it just becomes a big floppy mess on the floor. As I go along, I'll be hopping between narrative-focused exploration and world-building design work. I can't tell the story without the designs, and I can't find the designs without the story. I'll have to be building up the bones and the flesh at the same time. Which means that throughout this series, I'll be circling back around regularly to create thumbnail outlines just like this. These will be fast drawings meant to communicate narrative beats, and they'll serve a few functions. They'll allow me to rapidly iterate on where the story might lead. A quick drawing can be easily thrown away and replaced by another. Hopefully, by the end, my rejected pile will be far taller than my approved pile. These thumbnails will also help me decide what needs to be designed, and in what context. You'd be surprised how many times these quick drawings reveal all of the things you weren't thinking about. I also need to do some thinking about the final presentation of Dead Gods. I'm not totally convinced that doing the same movie screenshot style as Tellurian will work here. By sketching out more of the story, it'll help me to think about what kinds of visual languages will be most useful for telling this kind of story. So here's the first pass at Chapter 1, The Hunter, Version 1. It starts out with the shipwright praying. As he does, a predator will approach in the distance. The shipwright is alerted to its presence, but doesn't react with fear. We'll see that the ground is covered in bright red roots, with animal bones strewn about. The predator steps closer onto one of these roots. The root sends a signal to the death mangrove's branches above to release a cluster of deadly seed pods. The predator is impaled. After traveling through more jungle, he'll come across a beautiful river valley populated by herds of creatures. It's a welcome sight. As a shepherd with centuries of experience, he's right at home among wild herds. He has them literally eating out of the palm of his hand. A sudden noise draws the herd's attention. It's a colossal dragon entering the plains. The herd begins to scatter. The shipwright draws his weapons, but he notices that a young animal didn't run, but hid behind him. This complicates things. He grabs his cloak, flings it open wide, revealing large eye spots to the dragon. Predators are cowardly by nature, so this gives it pause. The shipwright takes a moment to smack the young creature on the hindquarters to get it to run to the protection of its own herd. Unfortunately, while this dragon is cautious, it's also clever. It's figured out the eye spot distraction. Time for a fight. But wait. A javelin pierces the skull of the beast. It falls down dead. The shipwright looks over to see the hunter. Raising his arms in triumph, his entourage cheers his perfect kill shot. But now that his quarry is dead, the hunter notices our protagonist. Intrigued by his courage against such a monster, he decides to send one of his acolytes to test him. The shipwright recognizes what kind of people he's stumbled into, and he's not waiting around. He bolts for the cover of the jungle. But the warthog, despite his immense size, is incredibly fast. He's on him in moments. There's not much time to think. The shipwright grabs a metal stake from his gauntlet, just as the warthog goes to slam him into the ground. One throw of a stake sticks it into the warthog's arm, and with his hammer, the shipwright plunges it through to the ground. The hunter and his party hear the distant scream as birds flee. The shipwright knows he doesn't have much time, so he races into the dense foliage. The warthog rips his arm and the stake out of the ground. In the midst of fleeing, something stops the shipwright in his tracks. The warthog is an even hotter pursuit. He bursts into the clearing. The shipwright looks like he's praying. The warthog smiles, and the shipwright smiles back. The warthog steps forward onto some bright red roots. He looks up, only to be impaled. The shipwright finishes his prayer of thanksgiving, then continues on his quest. Later, the hunter has found the corpse of his acolyte. He's a little more impressed by this prey. Next up, he sends, well, we'll see which one he chooses. So, a few things this already taught me. There's a few moments like instead of killing the dragon with a single javelin, I would want the hunter to have a more spectacular fight, something highly acrobatic that would show off his centuries worth of skills a bit more. I'd also want to give the entourage camp a bit more flourish, like the warthog should be sitting down under a tent with some adoring worshippers, and being sent to kill this prey should feel like an annoyance, like, fine, whatever. Ultimately, though, what I've really learned from this exercise is that I've got to spend a lot more time on the design side. There's a huge amount of world building to do. I have to figure out what makes a dragon from dead gods unique. I've got cultures to flesh out. There are tons of style and technique questions still looming on the horizon. Doing this outline showed me that it's too early for outlines, and that's a win. In the next video, I'll start pulling a thread on dragons that's gonna get... it's gonna get weird. This will probably be where I begin to get unhinged enough to start losing some of my early followers. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you like where Dead Gods is going, click all the usual buttons. If you'd like to help support this project, consider subscribing on Patreon. Special thanks to my Dragon Tier patrons, who get to vote on certain aspects of development and get their names in the videos. You could also pick up a copy of my previous visual story, Tellurian, or my personal art book, which is a collection of some of my favorite pieces from the last 20 years. Thanks again for joining me. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I hope you are too. See you next time.